Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tech Talk, the podcast where we decode the future of tech, AI, and business strategies through real conversations with the minds shaping what's coming up next. I'm your host, Jazz Kaur, and today's episode is for every go-to-market leader, RevOps architect, and commercial strategists looking to embed AI across their entire GTM funnel. Not just top of the funnel lead gen, but conversion, retention, and growth as well. Joining me today is Akanksha Agarwal, the Senior Director of GTM at Neta. Thank you so much, Akanksha, for coming to the show. Really very excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, same here. I'm really looking forward to follow-up conversations from when we initially talked about this topic, which is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, great. So before we actually deep dive into the GTM and funnel and all of that, would really like to know more about you. When did you start? How did you start your career journey overall?
Yeah, so I think you and I talked briefly about this, right? But this is my third leg of career, as they say. I started as a rocket scientist, became a trader on Wall Street, back at Lehman Brothers during the financial crisis. So that's a podcast in itself. And then, been in technology for the last decade and a half and more now. I have spent the last several years leading go-to-market strategy across both, high growth, high tech companies. I was with Google for a few years. Meta for a few years, based out of Singapore. I've been with 0 to 1 startups in the healthcare space. And then I was also with Compass, right, pre-IPO, and then went back to AWS. And I've been with NetApp now for the last 2.5 years. So I think a couple of things that you probably have picked up is jungle gym is often a term I use in my career and life. I've been very industry agnostic. I like to think about just serve scale and efficiency, irrespective of which industry I've been in. And technology, I think, has been very central to the way I think about scale. So to wrap up kind of on my professional side, I would say, which is why I think, if anything, I'm very excited in kind of the new industrial revolution we're in with AI and what's to come. On the personal side, because this would absolutely make my kids unhappy if I didn't say, I have a much more important job of being a mom of two.
At 6 I can completely understand that.
I think a fun fact, just I was telling you, I don't know, I was telling somebody else. My older one, my 11-year-old, saw my LinkedIn profile and said, "How come you don't have mom in your title?" And I was like, that's a very important point.
That's very important. And that's a full-time job. So nothing is harder and tougher than that, I would say.
Absolutely. No, so it's the purpose of life is often right beyond work. And my kids and family certainly keeps me grounded.
Yeah, I think we all are blessed to have such family and especially kids around us. So yeah, great career trajectory, Akanksha. So from rocket science to technology, and it's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the GTM and your experience. Like, you have been working in this area from more than 2 decades now. So let's start with the foundation. Most organizations still treat GTM as sequential, right? Where marketing generates leads, sales chases them, and customer success generally handles the renewals. So, but with AI, from last, I think, couple of years, we have been seeing a kind of shift, which is towards continuous and signal-driven loops, right? So for each of the section, we get continuous feedback, which has been placed in each of the entities. So tell me what kind of feel you have for this shift, which we all are seeing right now.
Yeah, look, you hit the nail on the head, just right. Like, I would say the first decade of my career, it's always about being that linear process, right? How are you generating awareness to how are you nurturing leads? How are you done closing deals? And then how are you handing it off? Right? So it's in some sense, in reflection, it feels broken and siloed. And, we've experienced different challenges from a go-to-market perspective from that. The analogy I use is, right now, it doesn't feel like a pipeline, but feels like a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Because I'll give you an example. So let's say you have a customer that is suddenly increasing your product usage.
Yeah.
Right? In a specific module, in a specific solution. That signal should instantly trigger whether your CSM teams, whether your SDR teams, and it should not be 3 to 4 weeks later, the way we've seen it in QBRs and MBRs, right, showing up, where we're still figuring out what to do, right? So the intent is very easy to understand and very quick to understand. I think, and the organizations that are going to do well from a go-to-market perspective are the ones that are going to break down their sort of funnel silos and really get to that intent to action as quickly as possible.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I think about like it's really changing. And we see that every day, right? We see deals that can go from almost feeling like they're going to close to at-risk deal and vice versa, right? Pretty quickly because of if you're keeping up with the signals that you're getting, right, through different channels.
Yeah, absolutely. I think signals are real-time behavioral or, contextual data. And the example which you gave is product usage is pretty relevant. So other examples like prospect is viewing your page, customer slowing down the usage, or any a lead engaging with a competitor, any of these information, right? So AI is really helping us detect micro signals, turn into the actionable insight. So this is happening such in a real time. So if you could track 3 signals in your GTM, top 3, what it would be?
I think the first one is a no-brainer. I think it's really intent, right? And again, historically, we've talked a lot about ICP. And everybody's focused on ICP and not as much intent. And not because we didn't think intent was important, but it was hard to get real signals about intent. So I would say the first one is definitely intent. The second one I would say is engagement, right? Whatever your platform is, how's the customer engaging? And third, I think is old signal, but it's still very relevant. Customer experience. And, just you probably read the latest blog I was sharing, right? The retention and the stickiness has become more important as a revenue strategy than it has ever been. So I would say, if I were to pick 3, I would say intent, engagement, and stickiness or retention.
Yeah, right. And how do you see the roles of marketing, sales, and customer success evolving? Because AI is in everywhere, right? It has not left anybody behind. So how is the roles changing, evolving?
I think the roles do need to really come together a lot more than they historically have, right? Like we have for ages now talked about how important it is to have that funnel flow, right? The handoffs. I really don't think it's about handoffs anymore. It's about a two-way street pretty much at all points in time, right? And I think the two-way street is important because just many a times, right, organizations still scope these roles differently. A CSM role in organization A, like Amazon, was different than the way I see at NetApp. So the more there is a two-way street conversation, the ability for us to engage and interact with the customer increases. And I think the way you measure that, right, at the end of the day, if we can move away from leads to outcomes, engagement to retention, right? The more we are aligning all these organization success metrics based on outcomes, the closer we will act as sort of one, showing up as one in front of the customer versus showing isolated.
Exactly. And I think the funnel and the linear GTM is the loop now. It's not a line. It's not no more linear. So capturing signals across touch points and analyze them. And like how you mentioned, then trigger actions. And it can be real-time actions as well. So this turns GTM into much more breathing system now. So at NetApp or even in your Google days, how did you start connecting those signals across functions? Because I think in Google as well as in Meta signals, these signals are one of the core entities. So how did you start connecting those signals across the functions?
Yeah, and I would say, look, in all honesty, we're still talking.
Yeah.
I don't think we're actually in the doing mode in the same way. Look, everybody gets AI is important. Everybody gets data is important. But I think the data or AI hasn't yet driven outcomes consistently. I think there are organizations that are using it better. But if you ask me, I think there is not an AI or a data strategy that is across the funnel yet in any organization that I've seen done well. So I'll give you, few examples. Marketing is obviously using, right, intent and engagement and how the customer is, engaging with your content or even re-engaging with your content at some cases. But that's siloed with marketing. There are amazing tools that are doing that, right? Then you have customer success that may have amazing signals on product usage, capacity is going up and down, right? Given the cloud nature of the businesses, Amazon and NetApp and others are operating in. But these signals are still not tying together in that loop that you talked about. So everybody is acting in the best way they possibly can in a silo. But now imagine you're the customer.
Yeah.
How does all of that appear to you? That seems disjointed versus kind of a cohesive customer engagement strategy. So I would be lying if I said we've seen an integrated, unified AI strategy yet in any of these organizations. I think the intent is to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a very valuable point which you have mentioned. People are talking a lot about all of these, but actual implementations might take some time. So what do you think, how long it's going to take to integrate all of these sections together?
Well, I hope it would be done today or yesterday. It is kind of a race to the first here, right? Race to the finish line, or at least a good starting finish line, because the companies that are going to do it faster are going to be the market leaders, and the companies that fall behind are not. So, however, now to the point on like how long it realistically will change, I think there are two things we have to look at that, Just. One is actual systems and infrastructure integration. Right. You're in that space, so you understand like how difficult it is still for organizations to integrate their systems, right? From the top of the funnel to the end of the funnel. So I think the faster, again, the companies can invest in that space, and the faster we can make the vendors make it easy for them to integrate with each other to almost open economy, the sooner we're going to get there. But the second piece that often people think about, right? Like tools only get you so far. But there is a lack of trust still in AI from leadership to that aspect, right? So it's the behavioral change, which is the harder one. And I think the analogy or the quote I use, often just people are still talking about, right? How can AI automate? Automate reporting, automate insights, automate the way we send an email. I think we need to start really thinking about that from augmentation. Because that's where we're not saying that there is no human engagement. It's about how do we make our human more effective and more productive. And I think that's an easier conversation than let's hand over the keys of the kingdom to AI. That's where the trust factors of the behavioral change becomes very important.
Yeah. And I think whenever there is change, it's not comfortable. So whenever I talk to people like in the CXO level, people as well. So any change, even a small change, right? The change is small and the system might not be impacted that much, but getting the trust and people are not ready to adapt most of the time. So that is a difficult part. And I think soon it's going to get easier, much easier. I was reading through one of the post of yours where you have mentioned about in AWS, you had some kind of telemetry loop and all of that and implemented some kind of signals. So talk more about it if you remember what exactly you did that part.
So I think we're talking about the same thing, but I'll give you the example that comes to mind. At AWS, right? Again, many organizations look at customer retention or churn. And one of the things that we built kind of earlier on is that customer 360 health scoring dashboard. This is before, by the way, AI became AI as we know it now.
And AI is there from
exactly
a decade or more. So
I think it's the generative AI.
Gen AI
is new, but AI has been there, right, for a much longer time frame. So at that point in time, we started really looking at product usage. We started looking at how customers cyclically go up and down with their capacity and model, right? We started comparing them with the cohort of customers that are in their vertical and space to start to understand leading indicators of churn versus, because look, if you're measuring let's be honest, if you're measuring churn rate or retention rate, right, that's a lagging indicator. The churn has already happened.
Yes.
So you want to get ahead of time, especially for your large customers, 6 months ahead of time, 9 months ahead of time to understand. So I think the product usage data, how the customer is adding solutions to further add to their platform that they're using. Are they using the full suite of AWS offerings, or are they using 1 or 2 or 3 and we're not seeing that scale? Were very intelligent data signals that we had used to build a customer health dashboard that gives us a better signal around churn and retention much earlier on.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very valid point, and organizations should start building up such use cases or such solutions where they are churn. For example, when it has happened, you can't do much about it. So it has to be predicted long before. So that's great. That's a great use case. So now let's go deep dive into the funnel and talk a little bit more in depth about each of the sections to understand how AI is really impacting. So the top of the funnel in GTM market is all about creating awareness and attracting potential customers, building brand capability, trust, and all of that. So And we often talk about right message, right channel, right time. How do you think AI is really helping in personalizing? So, when I say personalize, right now people are more interested in contextualizing instead of personalizing. So, how AI do you think is helping this tofu messaging when you are still collecting initial level of data of audience and still trying to build the brand?
Yeah. I think the key word there is what you said, just it's contextualizing.
Yeah.
So, right, marketing has always been about let's be relevant to right time, right message, right people. I would even maybe add to it is right persona, because I am a big believer in outcomes than just metrics, right? And when you're thinking about outcomes, the outcomes, if you're a CFO, then you're going to care about different outcomes than if you're the CIO or a CISO or right another persona. So how do you contextualize what that persona cares about? I think AI has now given us the ability to do that faster. Like, I think we've had the ability, before, right? But just the time it took to contextualize it at scale was very difficult. So I think where AI really plays to our strengths now is to be able to contextualize to different outcomes, to different personas in a much more scalable, faster way. So I think that's where AI plays in my mind. It's not, look, in many sense, just the playbooks haven't changed, right?
Yeah.
What's a good go-to-market is a good go-to-market. But our ability to actually be efficient and productive and relevant, right, is become scalable.
Yeah.
I think is the way I kind of think about this.
Yeah. And do you have some real use case which you have already worked on or implemented and help get a better ROI for the top of the funnel on right messaging? If you can remember anything on top of your mind.
So not recently, but one I would say is, technical teams play a really important role depending on the companies that you're in. Because if you're talking to a CIO, one of the things that they're really assessing is not how great your tool is, but how easy it is to integrate it, adopt it, make it part of their tech stack. But the other thing they also care about is, do I have the expertise within my team to be able to maintain the tool, understand the tool, so on and so forth. So one of the examples that come to mind is, right, like earlier on, it's no longer about, hey, look how amazing our tool is, kind of a conversation. But earlier on, it is becoming a conversation, even at the marketing side, where the customer wants to be able to answer some of their technical questions very quickly. So I'll give you an example of, I'll maybe call out something that a friend of mine, Amanda, she was the founder of 6sense and now is also a founder of OneMind. And what she's building is, right, AI avatars to make it more human and more real. But really what the fundamental core of what they're building is feeding a lot of technical conversations as well as customer objection conversations that you don't generally expect the SDR or the marketing team to be adept at. However, now they're being asked to know those.
Is it like coaching the sales rep or marketing rep? Yeah.
Exactly, right? So I think from an enablement perspective, right, you can really shorten that time to enablement on a lot of technical topics faster to an audience that historically hasn't been technical. So again, that's kind of going back, just it becomes about augmentation, right? So I won't necessarily say go ahead and completely replace your SDR organization and put the tool in front. However, if you augment that with the tool, then your SDR can now manage a lot of customer objections in a more relevant way faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. So yeah, let's move on to mid-funnel acceleration and AI in sales execution. So this is a funnel. This is a place where the deals stall actually. So at AWS, you spoke about deal health scoring, which is powered by behavioral cues like Slack activity slowing down or decision maker drop off. We know that AI can spot these patterns quickly than any human could. But do you think that this is getting really helpful to predict what's going to happen next?
Yeah. So look, I'm a big believer of the MEDDIC sales methodology. If you're aware of MEDDIC, right? It's a pretty globally renowned sales methodology that really helps to understand the right buyer personas, the right signals, right, the right customer intent at the right point in time. So it takes some of that subjectivity where Just could be more optimistic than Akanksha, but right, we're still thinking about how to qualify a sales stage more using signals and data and right. And that's where I think AI plays extremely well. So I'll give you an example. One of the things recently, we haven't used Gong, at the company, at my recent company, but I was going through a demo of Gong. And one of the things that really caught my eye is the predictive deal dashboards that they have built, which is essentially taking a lot of signals on your engagement across all platforms, whether it's Slack, whether it's Teams, whether it's email, whether it's voice conversations.
Yeah.
It's also picking up signals on like questions customers would have asked. And it's giving you additional data points at every deal stage to say, let's pick an example. Maybe I come in at an opportunity and I say, I think I'm going to move that almost close to commit. Going to give me details on, I haven't heard that the customer has budget yet. I haven't heard that the customer has the IT infrastructure or the resources to integrate. And if it's giving me those signals, right now, not only it helps me go back and understand the questions I haven't asked, but it now gives my leadership, my frontline leaders to their leaders, more data and insights to be able to coach and guide that conversation. At the end of the day, look, we care about closing the deal and closing the deal as fast as possible, right? Shortening the deal cycle. And I think absolutely, I do think that these signals that the AI can provide by taking in the data and the engagement with our customer across platforms is absolutely something very valuable that all CROs think about.
Yeah, I think that's very, very valid. And AI is really creating impact in this mid-funnel as well. So overall also, if you see that whatever example you gave, so it is giving signals with additional data points, right? And a lot of people can be exposed to that kind of signals and can benefit out of it. So it's really impacting in a good way. So if we talk about post-sale intelligence, you have already given the example of churn modeling, but this area, the bottom of the funnel, is the most unleveraged zone, I would say that. And it was rightly mentioned by you that it should be taken care much before, especially the churn modeling and upselling forecasting. So give me more examples and your experience from NetApp or from Google, that how you have been using AI or any kind of automation for that matter in this post-sale area.
Yeah. And before we go there, if I could make an additional point just in the mid-funnel, right? I think it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
So I think one of the other things we have to think about is how does it vary by segment of the customer? Because you're thinking about, right, the larger enterprise and strategic customers, right? Even mid-market customers.
Yeah.
They have longer sales cycle. They're more complex organizations. You need many decision makers and influencers and people who do the work. And I think that's where the signals that you're capturing are different. And the way you're capturing them could also look different, right? Because you might have the resources to engage more directly.
Right.
If you, however, think about SMB or the long tail of, right, any business, you often don't have resources to be engaging with every customer, right? One-to-one. So that's where the two things that I really want to call out, where I've seen the power of this done well, is partner and channel ecosystem plays an absolutely important role. And so how do you then embed into the signals that they're getting into sort of your one integrated ecosystem?
Yeah. I think this is a very valid point. Yeah. Please keep on.
And I think many organizations, we still don't know how to do that effectively, again, because our tools are disparate, our systems are disparate, etc. But I think that's a very important lever to helping us scale, especially when you think about the SMB segment. And then the other one is, this is where product usage and the way your customer might engage with your website or your tools, right, is really going to be more meaningful because you're lacking the actual one-to-one rep or a CE that has the opportunity to pick up the phone. So I do think that we have to start thinking about, right, what works by segment as well, not necessarily kind of a one-size-fits-all. So I didn't mean to derail us back to that, but I think it's a really important aspect of the mid-funnel.
Yeah, that's a very important point you have mentioned. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So now coming back to your question around, post-sales.
Yeah.
And so the post-sales, right, I think I'll give you kind of an AWS example without sharing the actual details, right? AWS as a business is a run rate kind of a business, right? So you have customers on your platform that are engaging with you, right, already in most cases. And many of the customers' spend or usage of the platform looks like this. because of, right? And that's the benefit of cloud to begin with, right? It offers you the agility to increase or reduce the way you engage with the platform. So some customers may be optimizing a lot and some customers might be growing a lot or doing it all together, right? Optimizing on some platforms, but also growing their maybe compute or AI, ML or other. And that's where I would say the CSM organizations in many parts just becomes even more important than your sales organization. And the reason I bring this up is back at AWS, right? We often used to think about whose role it is to be engaged in, when the customer is optimizing, whose role it is to onboard the customer the right way. Is it post-sales or is it pre-sales? And I think where we landed is we cannot separate those functions. Because if you're going to only focus on getting the customer in the door in a market like cloud and create the distinction and be hands-off or to have the rest of the post-sales managed just by the CSM organization, then you're really losing the relationship and the contextual management of what's going on with the customers. And I think that shift is what I believe, right, allowed AWS to have the agility to actually meet the customers where they were. And so I think like many organizations should think about, right, how do you bridge the gap between your post-sales and the sales organization?
Right. Absolutely. I think integration between the teams is very important. And even the data, like how you mentioned before, is very important across all the funnels. So data maturity, it is coming slowly with all the organizations. It might take some more time. But if I consider Google or AWS, I assume that data maturity is pretty much there. So what advice do you give to companies, those who are still struggling, unifying their GTM, data for AI to have a better kind of result?
I think my biggest advice is instead of us thinking about AI strategy, we should really think about data strategy because AI is only as good as your data.
Yeah.
And many organizations, look, even the Google and the Metas and Amazons of the world, right? I think there's a lot of progress being made, but you would probably still find that the data across systems is not as integrated. It's not maybe as integrated in real time as it can be. So if you have a lag in the way we're able to understand insights, right, that's not helping us meet the customer where they are. So I would really say for many go-to-market leaders right now, the question should be, what is my data strategy? And do I need to invest resources or tools? So some of the teams, right, which we used to call business insights or business, right, insights engineering should really be something that we should be doubling down on because once we can get the unified data, I think it's going to make it more meaningful for us to put any kind of AI tool on it to get the right insights at the right time. So
that's
about your data strategy.
Exactly. That's a very, very valid statement because if your data is good, your AI will work properly. If your data is crap, the results are not going to get good. So instead of AI strategy, teams or organization should first focus on the data strategy.
So, and the one other thing I would add just to that, right? Like this isn't about a one and done.
Yeah.
So how do you create the feedback loop?
Exactly.
Where there is absolutely a human intervention that is needed that has to feed into this model constantly. So if you just take all your data, put it right in,
that's not going to work.
That's not going to work. So making sure that the feedback loops are very, very strong is going to be absolutely critical to make sure that this is a sustainable strategy.
Right. That's again very valid point. And it's a continuous thing. It's not just one time done and you're done for the whole future. So it is a continuous process where you clean up, you maintain, you have your whole data strategy in place. Great. So let's talk about people and process. So initially we just touched a little bit. So getting AI in place is not difficult as, convincing people that, okay, this change is going to come and humans to trust and use it in a big scope. So what worked for you? Or what is working for you to have global GTM teams work together in, adapting this AI strategy?
I think start small, get some wins. Going back to the whole outcome conversation, right? Just pick an important enough metric or a problem. Don't hesitate to experiment in a geo, in a particular market, in a particular industry, right? Depending on the business you're in. Because going back to the trust part, right? If I'm walking as a go-to-market leader to a CRO or even a CFO, and I'm like, hey, we should invest in all of this AI tools and strategy, right? None of that is going to be good enough to earn trust. However, if I walk into a conversation and say, hey, look, we've tested this across the West geography of the US, and I think this is the outcome and the power of scaling this, I think that's going to go a much longer way to get the right kind of investments needed. So I think that's part one.
Yeah.
Test, experiment small, right? Get early wins. Second, this isn't about tops down approach as much as it's about actually taking people along. So get the actual doers in the business, whether it's your CEs, like make some reps as your champion, make them be the one that are shouting at the top of their teams and saying, we should absolutely be adopting this. Look, this is the benefit I got. I reduced my sales cycle by 30%. So I think getting the teams along and building the processes and tools and the strategy with them is going to go a long way. Again, because you need the trust in the system to be able to adopt this. So I would say that's the second part. And then the third part is measure. The amount of conversations I'm sure just you have, I certainly have them, is AI is everywhere. But when you ask them, hey, can you share a little bit of like actual outcomes that you've seen, right, at scale? That is still an early conversation. So the more you can measure, it will give you two things. It will tell you where to scale, and it will also tell you where not to scale. And really important parts to the conversation.
Yeah, I really like 3 points which you have mentioned, really, really relatable. And first one is start small, understand what you have to do, pick up the use case, test, go ahead. Second is take people, just summarizing so that we can focus and highlight more. Second is people. Third is measure. Very, very important points. So going ahead, let me ask you one thing. What is one thing which will tell all the leaders, those who are planning to have GTM redefined altogether?
I think my answer there is don't wait for it to be perfect. I think you have to be part of the solution to make it perfect for you in the context of the business that you're working in. Don't wait for playbooks to be written. Almost write your own playbook. And that will come by taking some risks, taking some experiments, failing in the process. And that's okay, right? If you want to be the market leader.
Yeah. Yeah. So just get started in short. So do not wait.
As they say, right? Momentum is better than perfection. So
exactly. Thank you so much, Akansha. And moving ahead with our next section, let's talk something about what you have been doing other than work, which is GTM work. You're pretty active in LinkedIn, you're doing, and you have been part of a lot of other entities and areas as well. Talk something about that.
Yeah, so look, I mean, you know this, when you have young kids, you don't have a lot of time. So you want to be very thoughtful on where you're spending your time. So look, one of the reasons I write, or I've recently started writing, is because I want to be able to share the learnings both with others. So it's benefit of others, but in various aspects, right? Just it's also a benefit to me. Because when if you write, right, you'll realize that a lot of times when you're writing, it makes you think about questions that you otherwise don't have time to think about. So I would say I've certainly prioritized writing a little bit. I think outside of
writing also includes more senses, right? It includes your eyes and
100%. Yeah. So I think writing is certainly where I'm spending my time on. I would say second, this has been an important part of who I am for years now, right? Even back from Google or Meta days, I've been very actively involved in our diversity, programs, whether it's on the hiring, retention, development side, whether it's women in tech, like you and I both come from, South Asian women backgrounds, and in technology and in engineering, certainly that has not been, you don't see a lot of those women still in the leadership positions. So for me, it's always been very important to sort of pay it forward, because I've had the honor and privilege of having amazing mentors through the process. So I would say I'm deeply involved in kind of that area, the mentoring, the coaching, and the women in tech. But the area that I've sort of started focusing a lot on over the last, I would say 6 years or so, has been really how do I think about neurodiversity and diversity that's beyond race, gender, and the visible diversity that you do see. And, look, I'm being vulnerable a little bit here. It started because of my own son and what I experienced right earlier on when he was 5 or 6. We found out that he is extremely gifted, but also has neurodiverse signals that you don't see, but it shows up in the way he engages with other people, or things that might, get him excited, or things that might not get him excited. And then when you start really thinking about that, right, from a work context,
Yeah.
The realization, this is an actual stat, by the way, 1 in every 5 person in the workforce today has associated themselves with one or other form of neurodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
That is 20% of your workforce. So it's certainly not something to be missed.
Yeah.
So for me, I think I'm the global chair right now for one of our diversity groups called NetAbled. And I think what we try to do is really think about how do we create that environment where neurodiverse professionals also feel like they can have an equal voice,
Right,
and feel supported, right, through the right kind of opportunities, the right accommodations as needed. So I think between that, writing, my work, and my kids, that's been more than enough to keep me active.
super busy.
Super busy. But last but not the least, look, I've started playing tennis again, which is
Wow.
something I really enjoy. That's always a good way to get some activity.
Yeah, great. I think this is amazing. You're doing a lot and amazing work, Akansha. And this discussion has really been a gold mine, trust me. Thank you for all the clarity, use cases, amazing discussion. So, and most importantly, your amazing energy level.
Like these are topics that are very important and relevant. And I'm certainly not somebody who has the answers, but I'm intellectually curious enough to see, right, what's happening in the world and what can we do from a go-to-market perspective to leverage them. So looking to give, but also looking to learn.
Yeah, I think this is what all about Tech Talk. That is more than important for us to explore, to talk more, so that our viewers and different other audience can listen to it and also get information that, okay, this is how we can grow. So it's really beneficial. I think 1 hour or even 45 minutes is pretty less. We can talk more. We can have more sessions, more episodes, and happy to talk to you again.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And when you're having fun, time goes by. So I just realized we're like 40 minutes in, and certainly it's felt an engaging conversation.